noise of the rushing world. A gentle voice, a story unfurled, wisdom from a distant shore, opening a brand new door.
The air has begun to carry a faint, tickling warmth, a gentle reminder that the sharp edges of winter are finally softening. It is the season when the news of plum blossoms starts to drift in from the south, and the late afternoon sun lingers just a bit longer on the floorboards, casting shadows that evoke a strange, quiet yearning. On days like these, when the world feels caught between what was and what will be, there is a certain comfort in sitting down with a warm cup of tea and a story that dares to look at the hidden corners of our lives. Today I want to share with you a masterpiece by a titan of Korean literature, Park Wan-suh, the short story titled Judy, Grandmother. Park Wan-suh was a writer with an almost supernatural ability to detect the microscopic cracks in the human soul. Whether she was writing about the trauma of war, the hollow vanity of the middle class, or the profound solitude of old age, her sentences always felt like a cool breeze that somehow managed to provide a deep, warm consolation. Judy, Grandmother introduces us to a woman who, on the surface, possesses a life that is the envy of all, a noble lady, with 5 successful children living abroad. Yet beneath this glittering exterior lies a spirit, drying up like a hollow husk. It is a story about the devastating loneliness hidden behind labels of success and the tragic human instinct to chase illusions. This narrative is far from a relic of the past. Even now, in an era where artificial intelligence generates our text, and the world moves at a dizzying pace, the fundamental human need for recognition and the fear of alienation remains unchanged. If anything, as technology advances, we become more adept at packaging our lives in brilliant, artificial veneers. Park Wan-suh's insight pierces right through that digital armor. So, let us quiet the noise of the world for a moment and step together into the elegant, yet hauntingly silent, living room of the woman they call the grandmother of Judy. Part 1. The Silver Frame and the Ritual of Success. Her apartment possessed a silence that could only be described as expensive. Through the large, south-facing windows, the afternoon sun poured in without hesitation, shattering into white sparks against the polished surfaces of imported furniture. In the very center of the living room, placed where it could not possibly be missed, sat a magnificent silver frame. Inside it was a child, who looked like a golden-haired angel Judy, smiling radiantly at the world. Every morning, the grandmother would meticulously wipe the dust from this frame. It was not mere cleaning. It was a sacred ritual, a daily confirmation that her life had not been a failure. I stand before the silver frame today, as I do every day, with a soft chamois cloth. I trace the edges of the metal, looking into Judy's face. "Judy, grandmother is here," I whisper. "How can you be so doll-like? Look at those golden curls. You look exactly like my youngest daughter." The world calls me a successful mother. They see 5 children, doctors and lawyers in America and Europe, and they nod in respect. But in this vast, echoing apartment, the only one who truly welcomes me is the Judy in this frame. And yet, it is enough. When neighbors visit and gaze at this photo with envy, I feel, for a fleeting moment, that the decades I spent struggling were not in vain. When neighbors came for tea, the grandmother's voice would take on an elegant, elevated tone. "This is my youngest daughter's child in America," she would say, her words wrapped in velvet. She's so bright, she's already asking for her grandmother in Korea. The other day on the phone, she shouted, "I love you, Grandma," so clearly it made my ears ring. She drank in the neighbors' exclamations of admiration, as if they were life-sustaining medicine. But the moment the guests left, and the heavy front door clicked shut, the sprawling apartment transformed back into a gilded tomb. Her successful children were far too busy with their own lives. The telephone rarely rang, and when it did, the voices on the other end were often rushed, offering nothing more than perfunctory greetings. The lonelier she became, the more vibrantly she dressed, and the more frequently she turned to Judy's photograph. Judy was no longer just a granddaughter. She was the final bastion of her worth, a brilliant medal she could pin to her chest to prove her existence to a world that was slowly forgetting her. I find myself wondering, are we not all, in some way, wasting our precious now to create a single photograph for a silver frame? The chilly air of that grandmother's living room feels uncomfortably similar to the hollow sensation many feel today behind the filtered perfection of social media. To hide the creeping sense of betrayal from her distant children, she felt compelled to write an even more perfect script for her life. Even the fact that her youngest son, the only one left in Korea, was still unmarried, felt like a blemish on her record. Driven by this desperation to maintain her facade, she eventually directed her steps toward a place that should have been beneath a woman of her social standing. Part 2. The Broker of Fate and the Fragile Ego. The place she visited was the real estate office of Dr. Ju, a man rumored to have a supernatural gift for seeing into the future. The atmosphere there was the polar opposite of her sterile, sunlit apartment. It was thick with the scent of strange incense, dimmed by low lighting, and cluttered with artifacts that exuded a forced mystery. At first, the grandmother chided herself for even stepping foot in such a place, tilting her chin up to maintain her dignity. How did I end up here? I, who have lived my entire life with such refinement, listening to the ramblings of a fortune-teller. But I must know the fate of my youngest son. All my other children have succeeded. I cannot let this last one become a stumbling block. I cannot allow a single flaw in my perfect life. I am not a vulgar person. I am simply here to verify the future. I hope this Dr. Ju doesn't look at my clothes and think he can treat me lightly. However, Dr. Ju's eloquence was seasoned enough to dismantle her rigid pride in an instant. He was a master of reading the room. With a single glance at her expensive attire, her precise diction, and the microscopic tremor in her eyes, he knew exactly what she hungered for. "Don't worry about your son," he would say, his voice a low, comforting rumble. "He has a powerful aura. He is destined to meet a person of great influence. But madam, your own physiognomy is so noble that your children have flourished simply by basking in your light." Every time he paused for effect, her heart skipped a beat. It was a profound irony. A woman who had spent her life armored in culture and class found her only true consolation in the calculated flattery of a charlatan. In this moment, the author sharply exposes the duality of modern humanity. We often find ourselves enchanted by a sweet lie, even when we suspect it is false. It is the same psychological mechanism that kept the grandmother tethered to Judy's photograph. Dr. Ju puffed up her vanity, praising her successful harvest of children. As she handed him the consultation fee, she likely felt as though she were buying a temporary reprieve from her own anxiety. Yes, he sees it too. My face is that of a noblewoman. Even Dr. Ju says my life is the envy of others. Now that I know my son will find a good match soon, I can finally breathe. It's only natural that people envy me. I have earned that right. My life has not been a mistake. Like the Judy in the silver frame, my future will continue to sparkle. Through her meetings with Dr. Ju, the grandmother, fortified the walls of her imaginary castle. But those walls were weaker than a sandcastle at high tide. Peace built on a foundation of falsehood is ready to collapse at the slightest breeze. Park Wan-suh's prose remains calm, but between the lines, one can feel a deep ache for the grandmother's retreating figure, a lament for human folly. As she left the office, her stride was more confident than when she arrived. Yet she was walking straight into a deeper quagmire of solitude. What is it that we truly believe is real in our lives? Part 3. The shattering of the silver illusion. For a while, her life returned to its predictable, elegant rhythm. The morning dusting of the frame, the waiting for news from abroad, the subtle boasting to the neighbors. It was a repetitive, graceful cycle. But one day, an event occurred that would instantly demolish her carefully constructed world. It wasn't a grand tragedy or a financial collapse. It was a hollow, accidental revelation born from a misunderstanding. The neighbors, who had listened to her praise Judy's brilliance for so long, began to whisper. Some were skeptical, while others were simply curious. One afternoon, while the grandmother was once again showcasing the silver frame and extolling Judy's virtues, a neighbor asked a question that was seemingly casual, yet utterly lethal. "Oh, grandmother, is that child in the photo really your granddaughter? The other day, I ran into a friend of your youngest daughter who was visiting from the States. She mentioned that your daughter doesn't have any children yet. She said she has a very beautiful puppy, though, and that the puppy's name is Judy. Grandmother, who is the child in this picture? Is this a photo clipped from a foreign magazine?" The grandmother's heart felt as though it had stopped beating. The truth was a cold, sharp blade. Judy was not her granddaughter. Judy was a phantom, a composite of the affection she wished she received from her distant children. Her children were always too busy to send a single photograph, and the grandmother had been desperate for something to show the world. And so, she had found the most beautiful child in a magazine, clipped the image, placed it in the silver frame, and began calling her Judy. How can they say such a thing? Judy is my granddaughter, my precious little puppy of a girl. But a real puppy? My daughter chose a dog over a child and named it Judy? Then who is this face I have been wiping every morning? What have I been pouring my soul into? The way they look at me has changed. They are laughing behind their hands. My elegant life, my noble title, it's all turning to dust. With those few words, her universe shattered into jagged pieces. The decades she spent laboring for her children's success and her own social standing were reduced to a pathetic reality. A woman so lonely she had to pass off a dog's name as a granddaughter's. Park Wan-suh uses this twist to brilliantly illustrate the disintegration of the traditional family and the profound alienation of the elderly in modern society. The child in the frame was perhaps who the grandmother herself wanted to be, or perhaps a representation of the love and youth she had lost long ago. After the truth was exposed, the grandmother was no longer a noble lady. She was simply an old woman in an empty apartment, a tragic figure who had staked her life on the name of a dog. Rather than mocking her vanity, we are struck by a deep, agonizing pity for a loneliness so vast that such a lie was the only way to survive. How many of us are different from her? How many parents, or how many of us in the future, will find ourselves clinging to similar illusions? The author exposes the truth with surgical coldness, yet she never lets go of her profound compassion for the human condition. Conclusion. Finding the ground beneath the frame. We have journeyed together through Park Wan-suh's Judy grandmother. How does it sit with you? When the name Judy, which the grandmother fought so hard to protect, scattered like ash, did you feel a small crack in your own heart as well? This story isn't merely a critique of an old woman's vanity. It is a stern warning and a poignant meditation for all of us who might be neglecting our real lives in favor of the lives we show to others. The belief that a child's success is the only insurance for one's old age. The delusion that being envied by others is synonymous with happiness. The grandmother faced the cold reality at the end of these misconceptions. Yet, the author does not leave us in total despair. The space where the grandmother's walls crumbled might just be the starting point for her to finally meet her true self. Perhaps by removing the fake photograph and facing the empty frame, she finally gained the opportunity to confront and heal her genuine loneliness. In an age of flickering screens and fleeting content, the weight of Park Wan-suh's sentences offers a resonance that technology cannot replicate. Her ability to peer into the abyss of the human psyche and embrace its contradictions is the mark of a master who lived through her era with fierce honesty. I hope this story has left a small, meaningful echo in your soul. For a moment, I invite you to think about that quiet living room. Is there a silver frame in your own heart? Something you polish every day that doesn't actually contain the truth of who you are. Real happiness is rarely found in the distant success of others or in the luster of expensive things. It is found in the warmth of the tea you are holding right now, and in the sincere gaze of the person sitting across from you. Thank you for spending this time listening to the story of Judy grandmother. I hope that your life blooms not on the fragile walls of illusion, but on the solid, honest earth of reality. Just as the air shifts between cold and warm to prepare for the spring, may our hearts deepen through these cycles of trial and realization. I wish you a peaceful and contemplative evening. Thank you.